What's up guys, my name is Richard. Today we're going to be talking about what's a good APR when you're providing liquidity and trying to yield farm. And I wanted to share a few thoughts that relates to the risk, reward with different types of APRs and different strategies. So if we look at this risk and reward curve here, a lot of times when the risk goes up, the reward is also higher. Sometimes you see on YouTube, people try to bait you with like 100 to 300% APR as safe, but really it's towards this high end on the risk curve, right? It's high reward, but also quite risky. Personally, I aim for about 50 to 100% APR. Sometimes it drops to 30 during low volume, but I don't mind that. I know that I'm more towards the middle and lower risk side. And this is generally true, guys. Like there are some opportunities, for example, where the risk is low and the reward is high up here, right? But those are harder to find, and when people find them, then the reward would drop to match the risk, right? So this is very important to understand. Don't get drawn in and tricked by like really high APR numbers thinking that it's something that's sustainable, right? So there's four main factors that you want to look at when it comes to providing liquidity that affects your APR. We're going to look at each one in depth here. So the first one is liquidity, second is the volume, the third is the range, and lastly the fee tier. So if we look at ETH and SOL here on Ethereum mainnet, this is the total value locked, so basically the amount of liquidity in the pool. Over the past 180 days, you can see that sometimes it spikes all the way up to 18, 19 million USD. So this largely depends on how much people put into the pool and also on the base asset and the quote asset in the pool. And this is the total liquidity. You can see the trend over time. Recently, people removed liquidity, and I actually added liquidity recently. So it's a good thing for me that people kind of left, right? So then I have elevated APR until some other people return. So that's total liquidity. Let's look at liquidity concentration. So this is one of my open position, right? I told you guys I just entered SOL and ETH. As you can see, this curve here, my min and max range, right, is around 0.025 to 0.099. And the liquidity is quite concentrated here, up at 0.063 to about 0.07. So as long as the price stays in that tight range, my fees would not be as much. But if the market is volatile, oftentimes these tight range positions get knocked out of range and I get an elevated APR. So this is the same exact position with the amount that I have right now, right? You can see based on the 30-day volume and the current total value locked, right? It's averaging about 58% APR. But if I move the current price down, right, then the APR shoots up above 100%, right? Or if it moves up, again, it goes over 100%. So if the concentration is less, then I get more APR. Like one of the biggest advantage of wide range is that these tight ranges get knocked out of range and you get to absorb these high APR. And oftentimes when we see like really big price movement, we're gonna see higher volume as well. So the next thing we're gonna look at is the volume. Hopping back at the same pool here, ETH and SOL, we can see over the past 180 days and check if the volume is consistent. If you look here back in last September, it's around like 2 to 5 million, and we could see like a pretty big increase overall. So it's a good sign that the volume is picking up, right? And if you look at the volume to TVL, you can see that the trend is trending up as well. So right now it's about 2.04 because of the recent Trump announcement. But as you can see, even the low point is like 0.34, 0.53, 0.66. Compared to a few months back, the low point is like 0.1 right? 0.11, 0.19. So we are seeing like a higher volume compared to total value locked. So when you look at volume and liquidity, you always compare with one and another, right? And if the higher volume it is compared to the total value locked, then usually the higher APR you can get. So the third thing we want to look at is the range, right? How it relates to APR. Again, I have a wider range because I want to have more asset appreciation and also less impermanent loss. I expect this pair to be quite volatile. So if you look at the SOL and ETH chart, you can see it's quite volatile. It bounced from like 0.054 all the way and wicked all the way up to like 0.093. So it doesn't make sense to have so much of a concentration because you're not going to stay in range for long, and you'll probably make more if you have a wider range. So if we, for example, squeeze the range here, I decrease the range to about 0.053 to 0.08. Just an example, my APR rises from like 50 something percent to 174%, right? So the APR is quite good for this pool. But again, if you're doing this, then you're at a much higher risk of impermanent loss, right? And if we zoom out on the chart here, it's not inconceivable that SOL ETH would maybe one day break down to 0.033, right? And currently my LP is worth around 17.4 ETH. If it drops down to 0.033, then I'm left with around like 9 ETH. So let's compare that with like a wider range that I had. If we drop back to 0.033, then I still have about 12.44 ETH left, right? So there's much less risk for loss, but you're trading lower APR for that. In my opinion and in my past experience, I prefer wider pools, but your opinion and your experience might be different, and it also depends on your strategy. So the last thing we want to look at is the fee tier. For example, ETH and SOL here has a 0.3% fee tier, which means that around roughly every $100 that goes through here, about 30 cents of that goes to the liquidity provider. Compared to something like Pixel and ETH, Pixel and ETH is a much smaller cap token, right, compared to SOL. So the fee tier is usually at 1% for lower cap tokens. So assuming the volume is the same, the total value locked the same, Pixel and ETH is getting like 3 times worth of fees compared to ETH and SOL, right? So if you only look at liquidity and volume without looking at the fee tier, then you might not realize that lower fee tier would need more volume running through the pool to basically make the same amount as a higher fee tier. So when you're running simulation, like for example on ETH and USDC, there's often different fee tier like 0.05% or even 0.01% that you want to run simulations through and make sure you're selecting the pool with like the better distribution and also like the higher volume and higher return for your assets, right? So Revert kind of does this for you, right? If you look at fees per reserve, it shows you what fees you could expect, right? It factors in the fee tier and the liquidity and the volume already. So that's it for the video, guys. There's 4 main factors here that affects your APR. Again, I try to aim for 50 to 100% APR because I'm more risk averse. And a lot of people actually got wrecked, right? Trying to get higher APR during the past few weeks. And the market absolutely tanked, right? Their positions are getting knocked out of range and they might have to realize a lot of impermanent loss. And this video is part of the beginner DeFi video series that I'm making. We'll also run through a few case studies and see how I pick the liquidity pools, and hopefully that will help your process as well. Thanks for watching, guys. Check out a few other videos on my channel. It really helped me to learn all these stuff, and hopefully that helps you as well. See you guys next time.